Hello and welcome to IASPrimers. So in today's daily news analysis, we are covering the Hindu newspaper's Delhi edition. And as part of our initiative, I make it a point to share questions for mains answer writing practice, and the concept is very simple. Basically, to inculcate the skill of correlating the news with the mains paper, the way in which exam is going to ask you questions, right? That is the simple task over here. So your news, this initiative, obviously we are covering the news, but news is about the analysis that will help you with your examination. And naturally, let's say in this today, we are going to discuss the money laundering. We had one more article, so we are clubbing it together. So naturally, what steps have the government taken to resolve the situation, right? So this will help us with prelims also. So everything is being covered in a very concise manner, in a very to the point manner, and you're also saving a lot of time. And when you're writing your answers, maintain the register like this and write your answers, so your notes are also getting prepared. So it's a very small thing and it will really help you, right? Over and above, you're going to need NCERTs, of course. You're going to need NCERTs, and maybe you can take some initiative of test series or something. Free tests are there, so that's all that you're going to need. Okay, now naturally when you're writing your answers, you want evaluation. So you can keep following our channel, and there is free evaluation. So up to 2 answers per week. You can share your answers on my WhatsApp or on my Telegram, right? So personalized message. And the details are there in the description box below. Okay, so today morning I had shared 2 questions and I'm trying this approach. So today we have a question on money laundering. Basically, this is a past year question. So this was asked in 2013, but I will add some more components to it, right? Some more dimensions to it. So basically this question, we were looking at economic sovereignty, but it is lots more to that. It is not just an economic problem. So this is a perspective I want to add. Then, although I think this news is a bit old now, today morning at 6 o'clock, there was an announcement that Russia has engaged in military action against Ukraine, right? So, but nevertheless, that question is still valid. And that is the best part about the current affairs, is that current affairs is actually the biggest static thing. It's like a scam actually, right? So if you prepare in the right way, you are sorted actually. You don't have to worry about things. The issues basically remain the same. And in fact, and that stands true for the prior questions also that I've shared with reference to the Ukraine crisis. Okay, so these are the things, and then other things are basically for prelims. And yes, I'm going to look at the power sector reforms, not really covered in today's opinion section, not really covered, but I will do it. Plus, we will add some government schemes for power sector reforms. Right, so this is it. Let's come to the issue. So you saw the first page, right? Nawab Malik has been arrested by the Enforcement Directorate. Now you can write down in the comment section, Enforcement Directorate is coming under the which ministry? I think it's Ministry of Finance, right? So you can just cross check this. Okay. Now let's come to the issue of money laundering. So there was another article also. So a case is being heard at the Supreme Court with reference to money laundering. And the center has said that money laundering is a global problem. So they have said that we have introduced a law known as Prevention of Money Laundering Act. I think this is self-explanatory. So for this, they are saying that 18,000 crores have been confiscated. Then they are saying that there are cases pending for worth rupees 67,000 crores. Now with reference to PMLA, the issue is, money laundering, the issue is that we don't really find actual quantum of number that money has been laundered. Right, but yes, we have some anecdotal evidence, or we have evidence like this. So this you can say, and then say that the issue is actually much bigger than this. Then it has given reference of other countries also which are suffering because of it. They are giving a fact with reference to United Nations, where it says that the proceeds of crime being laundered amount to $2.1 trillion or 3.67% of the GDP, and this crime is transnational in nature. And this is associated with narcotics, money laundering, terrorism. Okay, so this is it. I think let's come to the question itself. Directly we'll do the question, and everything will fall in place automatically. Okay, so this was a question that was asked in 2013. Money laundering poses a serious threat to the country's economic sovereignty. Now this particular thing is very important. So money laundering, economic sovereignty. What is its significance for India and what steps are required to be taken to control this menace? So this was asked in GS3 paper, so internal security. Right. Okay, let's look at the question only. I had the difficulties with the definitions, right? So that is but I want you to have a very clear definition of money laundering. That is the basic thing. So what is money laundering basically? Right? Money laundering is basically the proceeds of crime, all these unorganized crime syndicates like drug mafia, terrorism, right? So all kidnapping, human trafficking. So all these people are engaged, unorganized crime, criminals or syndicates. Let me just write this. So they are engaged in unlawful activities, illegal activities. So the money that is accruing because of this, or in other words, the proceeds of the crime, right? So proceed of the crime, the problem is that this is illegitimate money. Normally the salaries that we get or whatever money is there, and when we file ITR, that is legitimate money. It is coming by legitimate means, and nobody will ask us questions because how do we spend, how do we use it. But this is illegitimate money and big amounts of money. So money laundering is basically the act that how do we make this illegitimate or ill-gotten wealth, convert them into a legitimate money. So that is basically money laundering. So what happens really is that unorganized crime mafia, what they do is, there are basically 3 steps of money laundering. So the first step is placement. So to place money, to place or to transfer money into a jurisdiction where the tax laws are basically lax, right? So basically all the money is there, then it is parked in different places, right? That is basically placement. Now one technique associated with placement is, you must have heard about this, hawala in the news. So hawala is basically an illegal mean of laundering money or placing money from one jurisdiction to the other. And other concept is smurfing of money. So smurf, big amounts of money. Now if big amounts of money is being moving from one place to another, it can be tracked very easily. But if we break the amount, let's say if I break 1 lakh crores into small denominations, then it will be difficult to track. So anyhow, there are people who are expert in this and they place the money. So placement. Now it has to be converted, it has to be hidden, right? So what they do is they layer. So the next practice is layering. So series of transactions are done from one place to another. A web of transactions are done so that it is difficult to trace from where has the money come, right? Here it is very easy. So you see unorganized to placement, but series of transactions through fake companies or some means or the other, this is done, right? So it is becoming very difficult to trace as to who has engaged, whose money it actually is. So normally for this, you will find shell companies. There is a reference of this. So shell companies are basically those companies that are basically on paper. They are not having any business operation as such, but yes, money is being parked over there. So shell companies play a role as being a conduit of money laundering, right? Through series of transactions are there and it is hidden. Now the next step is to bring this money back, integrate this money back to the person whom it actually belonged. I mean by illegitimate means. So this process is known as integration. So it could be by means of acquiring land, or by NGOs, civil society organizations, because the tax regime is a bit lax, and then it comes back. In fact, if you go to and look for a property also, so they will say 2 crore rupees is a property, and 1 crore will take it in white from the bank, and 1 crore is in cash only. So it encourages such things. Then benami properties, that is properties without the name of the original owner. So by such means, the money is reintegrated back to the unorganized crime syndicates. Clear? Ready? Okay. Now if you can see this, what is happening? Round and round tripping of black money. So another concept here, round tripping of black money is taking place. Clear? Okay. So you can define money laundering, you can start your answer, you can state the quantum of the seriousness of this problem. You can start by stating facts. This is what the government is doing. Government is using the same facts. Why can't you use it? Right? So you use this. state the severity. Now it depends on your creativity. Where do you want to place the facts? Try practicing this, and this will help you with this. It will give you greater clarity. Okay, so you do this. Now, how is it a concern to India's economic sovereignty, or for any country actually? So first of all, what is happening? Placement, layering, what is happening in this regard? Outgo of money, right? So money is, huge amount of money is going. Prime Minister Modi said before the election that 15 lakhs, lot of money is there, lakhs and lakhs of crores, and we'll give you 15 lakhs to every citizen. So huge amount of money is going. So there is outgo of money, wealth from a country. And when this money comes back also, right, it comes via the stock markets, it comes via property or whichever means. So it has the potential of creating inflation, because now a lot of money is getting back into the system. It is outside of the control of the government or the RBI. So it is inflationary. Now, whenever you will see that when we have transactions, like if I buy, I can't afford one, but if I plan to buy an iPhone also, so some dollar, there is an exchange taking place in dollar and rupee, which I can't see, but there is taking place. And to normalize that, neutralize that, serialization takes place so that inflation doesn't take place. So in this regard, you will see that the country's sovereignty over economic matters is getting undermined. Then this is naturally amounting to tax evasion. In fact, money laundering is not necessarily with unorganized crime syndicates. We have some people who are Bollywood actors and some certain other people also, so who are engaged in legitimate activities, but they are parking the money in elsewhere. So they are parking money in other countries, small island nations where the tax regime is lax. So that is also an example of money laundering. But yes, in general, it is with this thing. Okay, so tax evasion is taking place. It is perpetuating the black money in the economy, right? So these are the issues over here. And yes, there are other issues also. You can add to this. There are other issues also. So first you state the economic sovereignty aspect, and then say that, see, these activities are also associated with terror financing, and it funds the unorganized crime activities, because the money is getting back into the system as legitimate money, and that will perpetuate, that will encourage more of these activities. So more crime will take place, right? So these are the things that you can bring. Now here, before I go ahead with the answer, there is one more thing. We are looking at money laundering merely from economic point of view, or the economic prism. Whereas the problem is much worse than this, and this is what I believe could be the next iteration of this question. So this was what UPSC asked, right? But what if it says that it affects the country's political, social and economic stability? So in that regard, then you have to learn how to link it with the political this thing, right? So political funding, maybe you can add that dimension to it. Using of this thing to perpetuate crime in the country. So in that regard, you have to say more unorganized is always affected with the lack of socio-economic development, backwardness of a country, crime mafias. So you are encouraging that if you are not able to deal with this, right? So this is a perspective that you need to learn to think now. Okay. What is its significance? What steps are required to be taken to control? First of all, you need to state what steps are being taken. As simple as that. It is asking you what steps are required, but required is over and above what is already there, right? So don't make this mistake. Say that these steps have been taken, right? You can state that recently an SIT committee was formed to look into the issue of black money. Nothing much really has happened actually. I did take a class on that, and there were a lot of things that were there, but not much has been implemented. So this is there. So you can mention about the SIT report, right? SIT was introduced. Then we have introduced laws like Prevention of Money Laundering Act. And over and above this, we have Foreign Exchange Management Act, right? So basically it keeps a restriction on Indians to send their money to other countries. So it's a restriction, right? So money laundering is also us placing the money in a different jurisdiction. So there is a restriction. So anybody whose name comes into it, he or she will be charged with FEMA. Then Foreign Contributions Regulation Act. This is with reference to the NGOs as to how they get funding. So they have to report this to, I think, Ministry of Home Affairs. Right, so this has to be done, and FEMA is with Ministry of Finance. In fact, this again was a theme that was being discussed in the Supreme Court as to why this is with Home Affairs and this is to be reported at Ministry of Finance. Okay, so this is their Prevention of Money Laundering Act and other laws. Prevention of one more thing, Black Money Undisclosed Foreign Income Assets Act. So with reference to Black Money Act, maybe that was introduced. And beyond this, India has been focusing on international cooperation because the government itself says this crime is transnational in nature, right? So this is being done. So for this purpose, we are dealing with other countries. So we have the G7. Recently, recall, G7 introduced a system known as Global Minimum Tax. So the idea is that no matter which country the money is being parked, it has to be taxed, right? So global minimum tax is dealing with the issue of tax evasion that is taking place and also with the issue of money laundering. In a way, it is doing this. So India has signed this. Then we have Financial Action Task Force, which is it's an intergovernmental body, and these things are important for right? Read this, I didn't add this today. So FATF and money laundering and its linkage with terror financing. India has been using FATF to corner Pakistan, its isolation, and pushing it to be moved from grey list to black list. I think you can realize, right? All countries are in white list, so they are abiding by international standards and norms, which are coming from the FATF. Those countries which are very shady, they are in grey, and those are in black, right? Hopeless are in black. So very few countries are there, and Pakistan is risk to be in this thing. Now, what should be done? So maybe you can state the recommendations of the SIT recommendations, SIT over here, reforms in the long-term capital gains tax, checking the activities of betting, P-notes. P-notes is one instrument by which a foreigner can invest in a country. Now P-notes means that the identity of the investor is not disclosed. So this is quite ideal for this activity to take place, right? So P-note has to be regulated. So these are the things that needs to be done, and you can also say that the money laundering thing has to be looked from a holistic perspective, because holistic means when money laundering is taking place, so is terror financing taking place. So money laundering and terrorism, we need to have an integrated approach. Money laundering and human trafficking, because ultimately it is the money that is coming from all those activities. In fact, all those activities in a way are looking into the issue of money laundering. Next, obviously things have changed now, right? So what Russia said was that Indians stand balanced, independent, says Russia. And I say that actually it wasn't balanced, it was muted. I actually say this is what Russia is saying, but in my view it is muted, because when every country was saying that, see, it is a possibility that Russia will invade into Ukraine, which has happened, India was like, no, you are exaggerating. So when they were talking in COD, Mr. Jaishankar say, you are just exaggerating, you are being short-sighted over here, this is nothing like this. Right now this has happened. And when they were saying, Indians were saying, they still called their people back, right? Their planes had gone to Ukraine, they brought back Indian students back into India. Right, so now we have this issue over here. So what we get is that India's statements, India's stance in the United Nations Security Council, where it said that diplomacy should be the way forward, and they were not in favor of any sanctions against Russia. They favored diplomacy and non-military intervention by other countries, particularly NATO and US. Okay, so here it has said that few things, that Pakistan's Prime Minister is going to Moscow. Right, so it's saying that, see, this thing is happening, but our relations is not affected, right? We our stand on Kashmir and other issues is in line with what India says. That is, the issue of Kashmir is a bilateral dispute between India and Pakistan. Okay, so this is there. Then, yeah, so this is it actually. Let's come to the question now. In what ways would the ongoing Ukraine-Russia controversy affect the national interest of India? This was actually US-Iran controversy, but yeah, I mean, same thing, right? So the same pattern UPSC asked already. Okay, how should India respond to the situation? And now we have a situation when the war has taken. Up till now, we were looking at things from the perspective that this may happen, right? The next news on international relations, we are all talking about this thing will happen, may happen. But now the war has actually happened. That announcement was made. And earlier, maybe yesterday, day before yesterday, we had the Russian government recognizing the Ukrainian enclaves of Donetsk and Luhansk, right? Luhansk. So these are being recognized. So basically, they have started this war. Russians have started this war to provide protection to the Russian separatists in Ukraine. Right? I've said this many a times that imagine this is Ukraine. So the eastern part that is there, this is ethnically Russian. Right? Okay. Now this is a very short question, 150 words. So what do you think? Ongoing Ukraine-Russia controversy. You can start briefly by explaining this. What all has happened. You can give the aspect of war over here, right? So you have to write this in one page. So you can introduce the aspect of war. You can introduce the aspect of the dilemma that India has. So the dilemma with India is that we are divided over here with reference to the US and the West and Russia. So in the recent times, what we are seeing is that India is traditionally being slightly leaning towards Russia, right? Even though it says it has its policy of non-alignment and strategic autonomy, but it has been leaning towards Russia, and that comes naturally because Russia has been providing it critical support, be it defense, be it that 1971 war, right? So it played a critical role in safeguarding India's interest till now. Now, but in the recent times, particularly post 1990s, after the disintegration of the USSR, we are having a unipolar world and we have been leaning towards USA. In fact, a question was also asked recently with reference to how US defense deals have affected our relations with Russia. So now we have been leaning towards USA, and we have so many engagements that is there with reference to pivot to Asia, where US, Quad, all these countries are looking at India to contain China, right? So this is the policy, and lot of defense related engagement has been taking place. So defense deals are there. Then there is cooperation, be it with reference to the Pulwama attack, so the condemnation that was there, right? So a lot of support is flowing from USA, and as a result of this, our relations with Russia is being undermined in this regard. Right, so you have to mention this aspect over here. So this is taking place now. When this is taking place, Russia is getting closer to Pakistan. So when the Uri attack had taken place, we were looking to isolate Pakistan at that time. But even then, Russia engaged in military drills with Pakistan. Right, so this really offended the Indians, but they said that it has nothing to do because they want to still have good relations with India. But it was kind of a signal to India that you cannot be too much towards USA, right? So these are the things that you have to bring about. And furthermore, Russia is also a partner even today with reference to supplying India critical technologies like BrahMos missile, then cheap electricity, nuclear power plants, Kudankulam. So Russia has been a long-standing partner despite certain problems or sanctions that India had to face because of the nuclear test earlier. Right, so it's a long-standing friend, but at the same time, the geopolitics of the world has been changing. So in this regard, how should India approach this situation? So once you establish this, and with reference to Pakistan also, Russia-China nexus, where Russia, because of the economic sanction that was imposed, it has brought a restriction on India to engage with Russia. Right, so be it with reference to S-400 missiles, particularly S-400 delivery, so that has been affected. Then we have so much of a defense infra, so many of our fighter planes, for them spares and maintenance, so many things will be stopped if we abide by the US-led sanctions. And now because of this controversy, the sanctions have actually deepened. right? So this has happened over here. Now I don't know what the severity will actually increase now. Okay, now the key issue is, which I never covered earlier, is what should India do, right? What should be India's stance? And this is a skill that other things we have discussed. So what India should do and what India has been doing is that India has been focusing on having a balanced approach, where India has traditionally been focused on non-alignment or strategic autonomy, right? That is India not leaning towards anybody. So what India can do at this moment with the situation now being so difficult? So India needs to engage in creative diplomacy. Now let that creative diplomacy be for the diplomats. For us, that is sufficient. So for creative diplomacy, how it balances, negotiates with different countries. For us to use this word is very good. Okay, so creative diplomacy has to be done over here. Whereby what we can do is we can seek exemptions from sanctions. We may condemn this, we may in a very muted way, but we still need to engage with Russia. And we may make a case with the West that, see, and we have done this earlier, we may say that, see, if you isolate Russia altogether, if you impose sanctions, it actually makes the world more polarized. So when 2014 the sanctions were imposed on Russia, so what happened? China said, we'll give you $36 billion. In return, they get oil. So the relation is getting more intimate. And tomorrow when there is South China Sea dispute or the Taiwan war that takes place, then what will the West, I mean Russia and China will have a combined action over here, right? So China is emerging as the next superpower now. So that will undermine the interest, and in that regard, that creative diplomacy comes into existence. But yes, you must say that use of diplomacy and to say that we must abstain from war, right? So those messaging has to be done by India. Okay, this I really tried to make this a case study. This was a news. I wanted to make this a case study, but I found two past year questions which I can correlate over here, but I'm not covering this. Okay, so basically there is this place, so JJ dwellers, so there were slums basically, and across the country there are slums, and there is an effort of rehabilitation of slum dwellers. In fact, I have a video on this also, slum dwellers. So this rehabilitation is being done under the Pradhan Mantri Awas Yojana. So this is being done, and this is in situ rehabilitation. That is, in the same place, a flat or an apartment would be made, and these people will be rehabilitated to that area, to that flats, right? And the remaining land that is there, that will be commercialized, right? For any economic activity that will go. That is an unsaid thing, not mentioned over here. So this is what really happens over here. Now you have this Pradhan Mantri Awas Yojana is under the Ministry of Housing and Urban Affairs. Okay, now I find certain issues that should be mindful for you also, because in GS2 there is a topic known as social justice. What is the government doing for social justice, for the rights of the vulnerable sections, etc. Right, so in that regard this is important, and you can see certain issues over here. So one thing that we see is, for example, the scheme itself, where it says that there were supposed to be 2,700 houses under the scheme. 2,700 households were to be benefited, but only 25%, about 25% of the flats have been given. So the rest is left out. And what do they say? They say that the documents were not there. But if you look over here, it says that earlier a decision was taken that we cannot accommodate all of them. So the government stance itself is contrary, and this is Delhi government, not union. Okay, so you can see, and this is an attitude which we can actually see everywhere, almost everywhere in the country. So this is there. Okay, so we see a sense of exclusion. We see exclusion taking place. We have various schemes for vulnerable, but it often leads to exclusion. So here we see this, right? And I can add Narega and so many other things, a scheme for drinking waters, but we see exclusion taking place. So scheme for the welfare of the people, but still they are excluded. And what are the reasons for this? Biggest thing is they don't have power. Chandigarh, the city that I live in, so 2-3 days power wasn't there, and there was such a hue and cry for that, right? But there are people, marginalized people, who will never get electricity for 3 years, 4 years, or never had electricity. They will not complain, and they say, what do they say? They say, what can we do about this? We do not have any power to ask the government. So the issue of power symmetry, power is not there, right? So this is important. Okay, then we are not aware of this. So these are certain issues over here. So lack of awareness, scheme for vulnerable often leads to this thing. Now in this regard, shouldn't we focus on participative governance, right? Participative governance, where we, at the planning stage itself, we engage with the local people. Shouldn't it be this way, rather than DDA making this decision, or the government making this decision that we can only do this thing, we can only do that? It should come from the people itself at the end of it, and they should be at the planning stage as well as the implementation stage. So ultimately the government is accountable to the people. I mean, I will go by Lakshmikant's no, but yes, right? So participative governance, it is undermining the welfare of the people, and more people, yeah, this is basically the same thing, more people as against planned surveyed, right? So these are the things that I wanted to share over here. What can we do to address this issue of vulnerable not getting excluded? Why is this happening over here? We have to bring in a system of accountability. We need to have the system of awareness. We need to have a system of participative governance. That should be the way forward. And I think you can add one more thing with reference to this, that is having a public service delivery law, right? So making the government accountable for the services that they provide. And the Rajasthan government has been looking at social accountability law. They have been asking for this social accountability. Well, that is, the government is accountable to the society, right? So the means are basically awareness, participative governance, information, all those things, right? So these are the things that I wanted to discuss, and this has been asked, this has been asked. I've discussed, but not the question per se. Okay, this was a temple, right? I mean, this is a temple, right? So this is a very important temple. This is the Khajuraho temple. Now, this is a UNESCO World Heritage Site, and this was created by a medieval dynasty, medieval century, by the Chandelas. In fact, I'll tell you something. The temple structures that we have are mostly from medieval only, not from ancient. Because the things that were made most of them were wooden or mud brick made, right? So stone based architecture came much later. That was during the medieval times, and that is basic reason for this. Okay, so this temple is important. So it has the Nagada style architecture and graceful sculptures of Nayakas and deities. So you can see this closely if you see, right? So sculptures are there, carving is there for this. That is very famous. Now, whenever you watch this, right, whenever you Google Nagada style of architecture, there are 3 styles basically. Nagara at the north, at the south there is Dravidian style, and at the in between is Vesara style, right? So 3 styles of temple architecture are there, and we may expect a comparison type of question. So let me explain briefly this thing, Nagada style and Dravid, what is the key difference. So let me make a temple, and you can see this over here, right? So at the temple we have some deity, a god, which we come to the temple, we enter through the stairs, right? We reach a hallway. Hallway is known as mandap. So this is the mandap, and what happens in the mandap? These are basically walled hallways, so halls with walls, pillars. So pillared hallways, so pillars are there. And for what purpose? Maybe some cultural activities was there, maybe some dance or any activity was there, or maybe the people were standing over there for praying, right? So this is the mandap. And then the person enters and reaches the main deity. Now there is another concept known as Panchayatan, right? So other deities are also there, but the chief deity is at the center. And to mark this, there is an upward protrusion that is known as Shikhara. Actually Shikhar, right? So this is the shikar. Now this concept is clear. Okay, now notice something, that this is semi-helical. The shape is semi-helical. It is carving. It is going like this. But when we look at the Dravidian architecture in South, we find this in pyramidical form. This curve is not there, right? So this is not there. It is very, very straight in the nature. And this is known as Vimana, right? Vimana, something that goes up in the air. Now in the Nagada style architecture, the shikhar is very, very important. That is the site where the deity is there, which is marked. So that is high. In Dravidian form architecture, if you can just search also in the net, Dravidian style architecture, so you'll find the famous Chola temple. So what you'll find is that this is the temple where there is the Vimana, and at the entrance there is the Gopurams. Gopurams are the gateways, and the gateways are much higher than the Vimanas. So that is a major difference over here. So just do yourself a research, check the Meenakshi temple, right? So you will see the Gopurams over there. Right, so this is it. This I wanted to discuss with you. Delhiites will get 100% digital delivery of services. I think, you know why I cover these news, because these news give us a lot of insight about governance. Because governance is something to do with the regional matters. All of the things that we find with the headlines, and so many times I'm doing, they are policy centric, but it doesn't really tell us about the day-to-day affairs of the people. And at the end of the day, if we are applying for this examination, we are looking into the governance side of things also, and we get better understanding. So GS2 covers the governance component also. Okay, so digital delivery of service. So basic things, I'll put it this way. I'll write it here. So why digital delivery of service? And when we say digital delivery of service, we are looking at e-governance. And what is e-governance doing? It is reducing the barrier between the citizen and the government, whose task is public service delivery, right? So that interface is now very close. For example, when I take online class, when we're taking this class, it's almost as if we both are interacting and there is hardly any queue or anything, right? So it is like a one-on-one thing. E-governance. Okay. So e-governance will also facilitate more accountability, more transparency, more participation, right? So these are certain other benefits. Okay, now beyond this, think. Digital delivery of services is, obviously we're looking at the delivery of services. Is it just about this only? Maybe we can add more things to it. Like for example, here it is telling us about certain documentation related work or license related work. Earlier they were talking about the RTO work, right? Is it just limited to this only? Can't we look at delivery of services or use of the IT in this with reference to traffic management, policing? Can't we say that all the data that is being created, big data or artificial intelligence in delivery of services, so helping in policy making and all? And recently in Delhi, we have this, what do we call this? CCTVs. So automated facial recognition system. So our faces will be identified and it will know, the government will be able to track us. So automated facial recognition system. So UPSC asked us a question as to how the fourth industrial revolution is facilitating the digital delivery of services. Right? So these are the things that I want you to think, but I don't want to burden you with questions. Okay, next news. So TNR's Supreme Court reserves judgment on Tamil Nadu's Vanniyar quota law. So these are the things. So basically the Tamil Nadu government had introduced. Madras High Court said no way, this is wrong. So why is it wrong? We'll discuss this. So now Supreme Court was hearing this and we are awaiting the judgment. Okay, now why is this very, very important? One is that it is a constitutional issue, and the debate on why reservation should be there or pros and cons, all those things also get triggered because of this. But more importantly, Vanniyar community is mentioned in the NCERT, and we find a correlation with the topics that are mentioned in NCERT being asked more frequently in the prelims. Right? That is how I mean, this is the way you have to study your NCERTs also. So there is a mention of, this is the 12th NCERT, right? So from there I found this. So Warriror and Vanniyar formed the laboring group. And there is also reference of other communities like Vellalars, a rural caste who took advantage of the new opportunities provided by British rule. Telugu Komatis were a powerful commercial group, right? So such questions can be asked, so such terms can be asked from you. Okay, now let's come to the issue over here. So basically, in the state of Tamil Nadu, there is a reservation. Already there is a reservation of 69%. 69%. So out of 100, 69% is reserved. By the way, Indira Sani judgment, the Supreme Court had said that the reservation cannot exceed beyond 50%. So that cap was there. So this is over and above that. So total is 69%. So traditionally we have reservation for the scheduled caste, scheduled tribe, OBC, right? So these are the communities. Now with reference to Tamil Nadu, they are saying that, see, there is a community known as Vanniyars who are as backward, right? They are very, very backward, like the scheduled caste, but only thing is that they are not untouchables, right? So the component of untouchability is not there. Their representation is not adequate, and therefore we need to have reservation for this. So a new category is created, that is most backward caste, MBC. So this category has been created over here. Now what is it saying? So this MBC has a number of other castes also, like Vanniyar and so many other castes, they're also there. Okay, so what has happened is that 69% is there. Now within this 69%, 20% is MBC. So 20% is for MBC, and there are various groups. So of this they are saying that 10.5% will go to the Vanniyar community. That means that de facto, I mean 20%, if total is 20%, so of this more than 50% is going to this. So invariably they will be advantaged. They will be advantaged, and this will lead to an exclusionary effect of all other communities. Now one more thing I would like to add to this, which I didn't include here, is that Vanniyar community, I included. So Vanniyar community is actually predominantly, the population is more, and they form a very strong electoral vote base. So maybe this is motivated by that thing. Okay, so this is it. Now Jammu and Kashmir government approves FDI policy for Union Territory. So this is just an update basically, right? I think this headline itself says this. So after the abolition of Article 370, and when we say Article 370, there is also Section 35A. Right, sometimes I myself get doubts. So Section 35, Article 35A. I'm having a doubt if it is 34 or 35. Please check this. Okay, so what it said was that there was a restriction, these 370 and this one, there was a restriction on an outsider, a person who's outside of the state of Jammu and Kashmir, to acquire land. Now you need to acquire land to have business operations, etc. So naturally the FDI was also undermined, because foreign companies, if they want to invest, if they want to have operations, they would like to own the land, right? So this was having a problem over here. So since the this thing has gone, right? So FDI policy has been brought in place, and more foreign players will come, and the idea is that more economic activity and development will take place. Now I'll tell you one more thing. I was pretty surprised. I always thought that it's a backward state, but even during the 370, if we find the indicators with reference to healthcare, the inclusivity, education are actually much better than, more advanced than the developed state of a country. The budget lacks the power to transform services, right? So it is basically correlating the electricity power, and it is correlating that the other services, particularly education and healthcare is getting affected. Now here we have a critical observation with reference to the budget, where it says that it's basically like they're talking about this, but they have gotten an opportunity to criticize the budget, and which I accept this. Okay, so with budget, what they're saying is that the budget says that we have increased the outflow, right, as compared to the previous year. But they had actually reduced the previous budget by 45%. So a sizable reduction had taken place, right? So in net terms, we see it's actually the education budget has come down. And there is a reference of e-Vidya program, which is about online education. Now, if you want to have online education, you want electricity, right? So without that, it will not function. And the same applies for healthcare sector. So here you will be able to find the facts. Okay, so this is it. What I'm really concerned about is power sector reforms, right? So hardly it comes. So I want to cover this power sector reforms, and in totality, I'll do it now. So briefly, let me give you an overview. So when we look at the power, by the way, this is the Niti Aayog document with reference to power reforms. So that's what I'm saying. We are not restricted to the newspaper, and we do a lot of other things also. So it's very simple concept is, yeah. So we have, first of all, an agency that produces electricity. So let's call this as power utilities or power generators. It is one thing to write on pen and paper and one thing to write here, and somehow I keep making spellings mistakes over here. Okay, so power utilities. Then comes, the power utilities have to supply electricity to whom? To the consumers, right? And the consumers, there has to be an interface over here. So these are distribution companies. So these are the companies whom you actually buy electricity from, and these are traditionally state electricity boards, and these days even private companies. Okay, so with reference to consumers, right, we can say that we have an issue of connectivity. So there are certain places where actually connectivity, that infra has still been created, but not till the household. Let's say till the village, the poles have come, electricity poles, but not till the households. So this is a problem. So for this purpose, the government had introduced a scheme known as Saubhagya. And these I'm telling all of you for prelims, please. Saubhagya. So what does Saubhagya do? Saubhagya, the objective is to provide Sahaj Bijli Har Ghar Yojana. Right? Har Ghar, every house should get electricity. So this will be done, free metered connection will be provided for economically poorer households. Okay, so this is there. Oh, by the way, notice this. We have a lot of other information also additional. Okay, now with reference to DISCOM, what we see is that because the consumers are not paying electricity, because not paying the bill, the electricity leakage is taking place, right? Farm sector is not paying electricity, giving electricity. So agri, financial issues, and weak infra. Obviously, when the money is not there, you are basically looking at just paying the salaries and not investing in the infrastructure, because that requires surplus capital. So weak infra. So to correct that flaw, particularly at the finance side, we have a scheme known as Ujjwal Discom. See, I make this Ujjwal Discom Assurance Yojana, Uday. Right? So I have a video on Uday. So my second video actually on this channel. So Uday. So this has been introduced to bring in power sector reforms. For basically the government will provide additional money, provided the DISCOMs charge higher tariffs, focus on improving the bill connections. So all of this, right? Now with reference to agri sector, we have two schemes. So one scheme is Deen Dayal Upadhyay Gram Jyoti Yojana, where it is trying to ensure continuous electricity supply to rural India. And it is saying that we need to have separate feeders for rural and urban. So separate feeders. So there will be greater accountability with reference to electricity. Now, which of the following provides for separate feeders for electricity? So it is coming under the Deen Dayal Upadhyay Gram Jyoti Yojana. Right. So this is it. And it replaced the existing Rajiv Gandhi Gramin Vidyuktikaran Yojana. Right. It's basically concerned with the infrastructure side. So funding for infra will be provided. And Uday is with reference to funding, financials, right? So this is the difference. Now there is one more issue over here. Both power companies are affected as well as the DISCOMs are affected. For the government, for them to have better resources, better infra, there is a scheme known as Integrated Power Development Scheme. All of them under Ministry of Power. Now with reference to agriculture, one more scheme is there which we have covered, Pradhan Mantri Kusum. So most of the electricity that the farmers are using, it is for running their pumps. So solar powered pumps, off-grid pumps will be provided to the farmers. Right, so you have problems with discounts. And what are the issues with the power utilities? First of all, we are too much dependent on coal, and when there is a concern of coal shortage also in this region that I live in, Punjab, there was an issue of coal. In fact, across the country eventually coal shortage was noticed, right? So this is the problem. Then the power utilities are not able to generate adequate power. They say we are power surplus, but the basic issue is that the discoms do not have the capability to supply that electricity, right? So we have shortage of electricity, and the load of electricity is going to increase. Imagine 10 years back there was one AC in one house, right? One AC. Now every room has more AC. So that power load is actually increasing. Okay, so this is there. Then with reference to renewable energy also, the power utilities have to buy renewable energy, but they are priced at a higher price, right? So they are operating at factors which are not sustainable. So these are a problem. They have to buy electricity at a higher price if it is from renewable. So these are issues. And today's time, when we are looking at being carbon neutral by 2070 at Glasgow summit, we had said COP26. So we need to focus on the renewable side, and we have to look at how we can integrate the renewable and the thermal component, or we can find alternatives to it. So that again will require additional funding. Now here we have regulatory reforms, structural reforms. So all of this are listed over here. Don't have to read it. I mean, if maximum it will come till here, you will need to know some additional details. You know it actually, I've covered this. So you don't really need to go deeper now. Okay, naval exercise is taking place at Vizag. Right, so this exercise is known as MILAN. MILAN means meeting, right? So MILAN, and MILAN of whom? It's primarily, this exercise has been taking place in 1995. This is a naval exercise. So this has been taking place since 1995, and it is a biennial. It takes place every 2 years, right? So yeah, it takes place every 2 years, and this was aimed at having naval cooperation with the Indian Ocean region, with the idea being that we can hone operational skills, interoperability, learn each other's best practice, procedures, etc. Right, so that is the idea over here. Right, so this is it. Now from our perspective, now the issue is that what you need to keep in mind is that MILAN is not restricted to Indian Ocean region. There are other countries also outside of this, like Russia, Iran, Israel. Now even the Quad members have been invited. Now we have a reference of another military exercise, Cobra Warriror, which will take place in UK, and Tejas will take part. Now I'll tell you something about it. Now when I was reading, it came to my mind. I once gave the RBI exam unprepared, but I scored very well actually. So it's you must apply actually. It pays very well, right? Terms, everything is good, comfortable. Okay. Now with this, what is thing is that the news that is very recent. Right, so such news particularly asked. There was a question on these lines only, and UPSC of course they will ask. Ukraine mobilizes troops amid tensions. Russia has already done this. China accuses US of raising tensions on Ukrainian issue. We know this. They will say this. US and allies unveil more sanctions, but that didn't help. Macron to kick off re-election bid. Let's see what happens. Israel missiles hit Golan truce line, and Golan was asked in prelims. So what is this Golan Heights? So this actually the place where it is located, and countries in clockwise and anti-clockwise arrangement, because if you look at the map over here, this region, you'll find a lot of countries are there and it becomes confusing. So that can be asked. Right, so Golan Heights is basically acquired by Israel. It is taken over by Israel, and through it flows the river Jordan. Right, so this is there, some facts you can spot, get it from the atlas, right? So this is what I basically wanted to showcase. Okay, some economy section news, quickly we'll do it. Inflation aspect, we know this, focus is on growth. RBI's monetary policy committee had said. So they say that if we focus on monetary tightening, that is, if we increase the interest rate, that would mean that the credit or the rate at which the companies raise finance will increase. So this will affect global recovery, right? It will affect the expansion. If the companies want to expand, they will have to borrow money, but the cost of finance is also increased, and therefore this will undermine this. Russia-Ukraine conflict to lift oil and gas prices. It's already very high. I don't know what will happen. So India imports 85% of its crude. Keep using these facts. Keep using these facts and you'll be able to recall it, and it will come naturally when you're writing your answers. RBI is ready for a fair debate on crypto assets. So let's see. So when this debate comes, we'll get more points. And we will move very cautiously on the retail use of digital currency. Right, I have a video on digital currency, a very short video, and China and other countries have already launched, and I don't think we should be much behind now. So let's see what happens. So we need to do, RBI said that we'll come with the currency, but very slow in this regard. Now this is something that is important. India can achieve $500 billion in green energy exports. Right, so what he's saying is that energy transition to decide geopolitical transition, and this is what is drawing my attention like anything. Okay, so what is geopolitics? Geography and politics coming together. So when we look at the South China Sea, it is basically the geopolitics of this region, that it is important from a navigation perspective. The 90%, over 90% of the trade is flowing through that region, the supply of energy, then that region being rich in oil and natural gas. Right, so it's mostly geopolitics. Ukraine crisis is a geopolitical issue. Right, so I've discussed this in the video, so how geography is concerned here. So it is saying energy transition, and energy transition is basically implying that with reference to green energy. So one is saying that climate crisis is an existential crisis, and energy transition will determine geopolitical transition. Now, one thing, like if we do not move into this, right, I'm making this up, if we do not move into the renewable side of things, and if we are still dependent on coal, oil and that things. So one is the climate change will increase, right? There will be shortage, and this will lead to geopolitical tensions, and we have to look at the renewable side of things. Now, because of the climate change that is happening naturally, and because of the unclean energy that we are using, climate change, so as a result of this, I may say that heat load will increase, water will come down. In fact, today itself, I was watching a video on mega droughts. So droughts, mega droughts mean droughts that have been going on for more than 50 years. So we will have more of these events then. So this will be there, then it will lead to more crisis, right? So crisis for water, crisis for other things, and that will again lead to world war. Somebody had also said that if water is not there, the next world war will be for water. So these are the things that you may consider over here. And yes, they're looking at energy exports. In fact, I think there was a very long back, I watched the video with reference to Saudi. So they said that what if the oil demand for oil has come down? Say that we have the most amount of sun and we will export electricity. So the same India can also do, right? So in this regard, we are looking at green hydrogen policy. We are looking at finding ways and means of storing electricity. We have still not figured it out, right? So these are the things that we are looking at this point of time. Right then, so this concludes our analysis, the daily news analysis from IASPrimers. So this is it from my side. And please keep practicing your answers. They will be really helpful. And I assure you that in 3 months, you'll be ready to go. Right, so this is it. Bye-bye, take care and all the best.